Welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to another very exciting episode of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 101. And by the time this video is uploaded, we are officially 2 full weeks away until the worldwide release of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 on October 20th. And I, for one, couldn't be more hyped. But knowing just how close we are to the game's release, and given the launch of the massive big-budget CGI trailer that we received for the game, you would think that the overall marketing for Marvel's Spider-Man 2 would start to slow down a bit. But fortunately for us, that's not how Insomniac or PlayStation roll. So if you're excited to learn about all these brand new updates for the game, then definitely be sure to flip that like button and subscribe to the channel for any major Marvel Spider-Man 2 content in the future. Now, to kick things off right with a brand new update for Marvel Spider-Man 2 in relation to its gameplay mechanics, we do have yet another statement coming straight from the mouth of the community director over at Insomniac Games himself, of James Stevenson, where in my previous 101 video, I did fully break down the ins and outs of the accessibility features that will be incorporated into Marvel's Spider-Man 2 that do specifically pertain to the game's web-swinging mechanics. And in those accessibility features, it pretty much confirms that the player will be able to fully decide whether or not they want to experience purely physics-based web-swinging within Marvel's Spider-Man 2 by changing that option within the accessibility features menu. So if you're a major fan of the Spider-Man 2 movie tie-in game, then you're pretty much going to be able to make Marvel's Spider-Man 2's web swinging feel fairly similar to how it was within that title. But once again, thanks to James Stevenson, we do have a bit more of an elaboration as to how exactly this option will work within Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Where, as James stated, for instance, there are 10 levels of swing assistance on that slider. The game starts at the default, which apparently, based on the previous Insomniac Spider-Man games with Spider-Man PS4 and Miles Morales, is that the default swinging assistance level is at level 10. So, it's a feature that we let players turn down to get more or less assistance if they want. Now, after taking all that into consideration, this simple statement from James is absolutely crazy for a multitude of reasons. For one, it turns out that after playing through Spider-Man PS4 and Miles Morales, which I still personally thoroughly enjoy to this day, is that we've been playing at level 10 swinging assistance this entire time. But now within Marvel's Spider-Man 2, we're finally going to be able to experience Insomniac's web swinging with the leash completely off, and totally begin to dive into a traversal system with no hand-holding whatsoever. And adding on this expert level of web swinging with all the other traversal mechanics within the game, like that of the web wings, as well as the incredible amount of variety with that of the slingshotting, loop-de-looping, corner tethering, wall running, and parkouring, I think it's pretty darn safe to say at this point that Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is easily going to end up having one of the best traversal systems within any open-world Spider-Man game to date. And I, for one, just can't wait to tinker around in all the settings by the time the game releases. Now, as for our next piece of news, this comes directly from the official PlayStation website underneath the Marvel Spider-Man 2 homepage. And on this homepage, alongside of it already holding a lot of info for Marvel Spider-Man 2 that I've already thoroughly discussed at length in previous 101 videos, PlayStation has now decided to update the page with brand new character bios, where all of these bios do feature characters that we already know about within Marvel Spider-Man 2, but we do get a much closer look at each of these characters, as well as a small synopsis as to what exactly their role is going to be within the game. Whereas this section on the website states, call on old friends to help fight new foes. Peter and Miles still have their ride or dies close at hand, but will their bonds be strong enough to resist the force of fierce new villains? Now, to start off with the characters that relate more towards Peter Parker, we do have his girlfriend of Mary Jane Watson, his best friend of Harry Osborn, and of course his best friend's father of Norman Osborn. Where for MJ, she isn't just a reporter for the Bugle, she's also an integral member of the Spider team, showing that heroes don't need superhuman abilities. And speaking of not having superhuman abilities, we still don't have any official word from Insomniac Games themselves as to whether or not the MJ missions will be returning within Marvel's Spider-Man 2. And while I know certain people do have their issues with the MJ missions, and I myself would obviously much prefer playing as either Peter or Miles, you can't deny that MJ herself is a very critical part within the life of Peter Parker. And being able to briefly play as her in order to see the game's story from her perspective does go a long way in terms of narrative impact, especially if it turns out based on the story trailer that we may have to play as MJ to hide away from Peter while he's wearing the black suit, that would be an absolutely insane mission to play through and would also be one of the biggest highlights of the game in general. But we won't know for sure whether or not that will happen until we play the game for ourselves. Now moving on to these next two characters in tandem is none other than the Osborn family, where for the father we do have Norman Osborn, Harry's dad, co-founder of the world's biggest tech company, and disgraced former mayor of New York. He's a pathological liar, but he would do anything to help Harry. And speaking of Harry, he is Norman Osborn's son. He has been away for the last few years dealing with the same disease that killed his mom, but he's back with a new lease on life, which we can already see clear as day within the story trailer as well as the preview event B-roll footage. Now for the cases of Norman and Harry, especially taking into consideration the recent CGI trailer, which does seem to debunk the ongoing theory that Peter Parker might end up becoming Venom, my biggest current suspects at this point has to be for either Norman or Harry. It's going to be very interesting to see what type of role the Osborns will have within the game, but also to slowly see exactly what type of relationship they have with the symbiote. Especially considering that Harry himself doesn't seem like he's getting any healthier, I can already sense that Norman and Harry are going to be some pretty big factors within this game's overall plot. But as we all know, Peter isn't going to be the only Spider-Man within this story, because for the case of Miles Morales, he also has a pretty big supporting cast too, where in this case we do have his mother Rio, his best friend Genki, and one of his closest friends and potentially girlfriend of Haley, where to begin with my personal favorite of these three is that some know her as Miles' cool mom, but most know City Councilwoman Rio Morales for her tireless work to make New York a better and safer place. Like we already saw within the B-roll footage is that Rio is going to have a much more emotionally impactful connection with Miles in comparison to any of the previous games, especially considering within the context of this game that she's already fully aware that both Miles and Peter are Spider-Man. So besides Peter himself, Rio is really going to be that emotional rock that Miles goes to for guidance and support. And I for one am already thoroughly enthralled by the actress who's playing Rio within the game of Jacqueline Pignol, who I think is doing an absolutely fantastic job. And out of all the other supporting characters that we do see within this PlayStation website, Rio herself is definitely the one that I'm looking forward to seeing more of within this game's story. Now moving on to Miles' best friend and partner in heroism, Genki Lee was the second person Miles told about the whole Spider-Man thing. And as for Miles' other friend with Haley Cooper, she is a community activist, street artist, and one of Miles' closest friends. She's creative, funny, intelligent, and compassionate, especially if you ask Miles. Now funny enough, I actually started replaying Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales in order to build up anticipation before the release of Marvel Spider-Man 2. And I have to say that besides Rio Morales herself is that both Genki and Haley are some of my favorite characters within the game. And if Insomniac themselves ends up further developing Miles' relationships with all these characters, it's really going to make for a much more engaging and entertaining story. And hopefully we not only see all these supporting characters interact thoroughly with both Peter and Miles, but also potentially end up interacting amongst each other, which is really going to make the cast members of Marvel Spider-Man 2 stand out even more than they already have. But to wrap things up from the game's supporting cast, we now have to get to the game's biggest bads, where for the case of Kraven the Hunter, a mysterious force of nature. It's unclear yet who this Kraven is. He and his teched out group of mercenaries are clearly here with a purpose. The Spider-Men just need to stop him before they find out what that is. And for the case of Dr. Kurt Connors, Peter met the 10-foot-tall, out-of-control lizard in college. Nowadays, Dr. Connors has moved on from his past and is Harry Osborn's personal doctor. And last but not least is obviously the main villain of Marvel Spider-Man 2 himself with the one and only Venom. This hulking, powerful beast has arrived in New York like a twisted natural disaster. The city has seen a lot over the years, but nothing quite like this. And if you're someone who knows anything about me at this point, even though I am thoroughly excited to engage in a boss fight with Kraven the Hunter, and also once again go toe-to-toe with the Lizard after already fighting him during the preview event, the biggest villain that I cannot wait to fight against within this game is, of course, Venom himself. I personally believe that Venom is Spider-Man's arch nemesis, and that both Venom and Spider-Man are two sides of the same coin. And based on everything that Insomniac has already told us about the symbiote's inclusion within the game, as well as what Yuri Lowenthal himself has said about the symbiote affecting Peter Parker's personality, and knowing what the symbiote will do to the host who eventually becomes Venom, is sincerely seeming like that this version of Venom is going to be one of the best interpretations of the character that we have ever seen in any form of Spider-Man media. And the fact that we have seen so little of Venom within the overall marketing material for Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is a huge indication that Insomniac clearly wants to save that surprise for the player by the time they get their hands on the game. And luckily for all of us, we don't have to wait for that much longer. And with all that said, everybody, that's the video I have for all you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. What do you think about all this Marvel Spider-Man 2 information? And out of all the characters within the game's supporting cast, whose story are you looking forward to dive into further? Let me know what you think. Be sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy, and for more Marvel Spider-Man 2 videos like this in the future. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay spectacular, Spidey fans, and until next time, peace out.